Welcome back to Bay Sunday. School may be out for the kids, but there are other challenges that children face during the summer months, and parents as well. Here to talk about them and give us some tips is family coach Dr. Pearlman from Brandman University. Good to have you with us this morning.
Good to be here.
So I've got a 3.5-year-old daughter. She's been spending the summer months in front of the TV here and there. I try to show her Sesame Street, things like that. But there are some tips about how much you should limit the children in terms of screen time. Right.
So the American Academy of Pediatrics recently changed their recommendations, and they say about 1 to 2 hours a day maximum. That includes iPhone, television, computer time, like any kind of screen at all. And, you know, I think that that's a realistic guideline, but parents should really interpret it for what works best in their family.
And in your book called Ignore It, you address a lot of the behavioral issues that you see in children and how parents should address it. What's the central message in your book?
So when we reinforce behavior with attention and benefits, it's more likely to be repeated. So when a kid throws a tantrum and we give lots of attention to it, or we give in and give a cookie, that child is going to be like, wow, that was really effective. We should do that more often.
And how much is it nature versus nurture in terms of behavioral problems?
I think for most kids, it's nurture. I mean, this is learned behavior.
Yeah, why is that?
Because it's effective. So a kid complains about bedtime and gets a little bit more of a later bedtime. Please, 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 can I get an extra, bedtime story? Or can I get out of eating these carrots? Can I just have 3? It's effective, so they keep doing it.
And in your book, you study behavioral problems. You also, I believe you address camp issues when kids go to summer camp and when they come back. What are some of the things that you notice from kids who come back from camp and they kind of have a difficult time adjusting back to their normal routine?
Camp is so fun. It's on all day. They're doing really cool activities that they don't usually get to do. Even kids that are home in summer, they're getting more ice cream, they're getting maybe more TV time. So there is an adjustment to when that ends, going back to school, having homework, having routines, having an earlier bedtime. So there can be a little bit of an adjustment there.
And for parents out there who are watching this morning, what are some of the practical tips that you can give them just in general in terms of parenting? So
I would say ignore whining, complaining, and tantrum. Just completely ignore it. And as soon as the kid stops, re-engage. And that will happen when they're, trying to readjust to school and all of that. And then I would say move their bedtimes back. I mean, really, kids are probably not getting enough sleep, and so we want to make sure they're rested and ready for school.
Yeah, it's good that you mentioned sleep, because that's something that I think all parents try to struggle, or they struggle with, trying to get their kids to bed on time. What can be done? How do you make their sleep most effective? Because studies have always shown that they need between 8 to 11 hours of sleep, which is somewhat unrealistic.
Yeah, especially with schedules these days. Kids are doing sports later, parents are working later, and it is really hard to get kids to bed on time early. But I would say cut out all electronics an hour before bedtime. Don't have any electronics plugged in the bedroom. So teens will try really hard to get you to let them charge their phone in at night. They'll say they need it for their alarm clock. Don't allow it. And really stick to your guns on bedtime.
And what's the general recommendation in terms of what time they should go to sleep?
I think for most kids in elementary school, 7:30 to 8:30 is a really good bedtime. And for middle school kids, 8:30 to 9, and later, obviously, for kids in high school.
Yeah. The National Sleep Foundation came out with a recent study addressing sleep issues, and for kids 14 to 17 years old, they say they get between 8 and 10 hours of sleep. What else did the study say?
I mean, truthfully, kids are tired. They're not getting what they need, and there are effects in school. They're moodier. Their development in terms of learning is lower, and so there are long-term effects to not sleeping well.
And some parents will go towards getting prescriptions, or even maybe melatonin as a sleeping aid. What are the recommendations? What have you found out? What have you discovered?
I mean, anecdotally, I've heard great things about melatonin. I'm not a medical doctor, so I don't recommend them. A lot of people use other aids like a fan or white noise. They dim the lights an hour before bedtime. They try other things to kind of get the body thinking about sleep an hour before bed.
So you're an expert in terms of behavioral issues with children. Whining, complaining from children, it's one of the, I think, parents' worst nightmares. How do you address something like that day to day?
So, I mean, kids do it because it works. So when it stops having a benefit, they'll stop doing it. So if they're having a tantrum in Target because they want something, if you ignore it temporarily, nothing comes of that tantrum, they'll say, well, that wasn't much fun, and nothing came of it, so I should just stop doing it.
All right, Dr. Pearlman with some pretty good tips this morning. Thank you so much for joining us here on Bay Sunday.
Thanks for having me.
Appreciate it. The book is called Ignore It. You can find it on Amazon and bookstores everywhere. And for more information about Dr. Pearlman, you can go to brandman.edu. Coming up, a children's bedtime story, or any time for that matter. It poses the question, what happens in the barnyard at night? When Bay Sunday comes right back.